Today, I am trying out a new lens. Or at least a new lens to me. I am trying out the cheapest 35mm lens that Fuji has to offer. Today, I am using the Fuji XC 35mm f2, a mostly plastic lens that I purchased used from someone on the internet. Honestly, most of the lenses I buy are used from strangers on the internet, like you. As usual, I am out taking pictures with my XE4. I chose this lens for a couple of reasons. Mostly because I already own 35mm lens for my full-frame system, as well as a handful of vintage 35mm lenses. So while scrolling through the buy and sell ads, I found this for cheap and decided to go for it. Secondly, I bought it because I'm considering selling my XE1. As stated in previous videos, it simply has not been my favorite camera to work with. I figured it would be easier to sell a camera body if it came with a lens, and pairing it with a cheap 35mm lens would be the most attractive to me if I was buying my first Fuji camera, so hopefully it works out that way. The first thing you'll notice with this lens is its weight. There's hardly anything to it. It reminds me of the nifty 50 on Canon bodies, maybe even lighter. After that, you'll notice that there are no switches, or buttons, or dials on this lens. There is no aperture ring, which means you're going to have to adjust your aperture with your front wheel. This isn't much of an issue, and only something to note. I decided to try out this lens relatively close to home because it was getting late in the day and I didn't want to be chasing light. I chose this neighborhood based solely on its proximity to where I live, and much less of anything I knew to be there. I came up with today's simulation based simply on keeping things relatively consistent and simple. I went for a clean, classic chrome look that had a little grain, a constant white balance of 4000 Kelvin, a slight tone curve, and I did something with the white balance shift. If I remember, I will add that to the description. The autofocus on this lens is not as sticky as maybe some of their more expensive and better built lenses. However, there were very few situations where I had missed focus in any grave way. Overall, as it has been said so many times before, the gear you use matters so little for 95% of the photos you take. Going out with a lens like this reminds me of when I bought my first DSLR. I only knew the basics when it came to focal length, and that was freeing in a lot of ways. The first camera I bought came with a standard kit lens. It worked, and that's all that mattered. This lens falls into a similar category. Is it great? Not really. Does it take great pictures? Probably not. But you do. You can take great pictures. And that's what photography is all about. You can show your favorite photo to just about anyone and you'll get a mixed response, at least sometimes. It doesn't matter if you poured your heart and soul into it, someone out there isn't going to think all that much of it. And that is great. Art should be divisive. What gets you off doesn't need to get everyone off. As long as you're out practicing as often as you can, and trying things out, you'll be improving and enjoying your journey. I found today that I kept taking photos. More photos than I would usually on one of these walks. I'm not sure if that was a product of wanting to get the most out of this lens, or if I was simply really enjoying myself with this lens and wanted to keep going. Regardless, I'm very pleased with what I was able to capture, and I will happily take this lens out again in the near future. Anyways, I know this is the first video where I talked in a while, so I might be a little rusty and rambly. If you liked today's video, let me know by hitting that like button. If you have experience with this lens, let me know in the comments. Thanks for coming along, and until next time, adios.